Hi, I'm Melinda Elmer with Century 21 Masters and the Elmer team, and today I'm here with special guest Rebecca Secord from Your Home Legal, and we're going to talk about everybody's favorite thing during a sales transaction, disclosures. So one of the things that I see a lot is people feel a little overwhelmed with disclosures, and really it's just sharing the facts that they know about the home.
Yeah.
What are some of the most common things you see people make mistakes about on disclosures?
We could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. The disclosures that you're going to either, depending on who you are, if you're a buyer or a seller, this is one of the most important things that you're going to do during the escrow process is either prepare them or review them. And that's where all of the problems are. Most of the issues that come up when you're buying and selling real estate don't happen during the escrow period. They happen after the fact. Why do they happen after the fact? Is because now you're in the house and you're living in there and you're like, oh, every Thursday, there's a parade of dump trucks that go down the street, right? At 10 o'clock in the morning when my kid's taking a nap.
Why didn't I know about that?
Why didn't I know about that? Or, when it rains, my garage floods, but that was never in the disclosure. So how do we figure out how those things happen? Why do they happen? And how can we navigate around that? So let's talk about the seller first. The seller is the one that prepares these two documents. It's called a transfer disclosure statement and a seller property questionnaire. And what these two forms do is tell a story about what's happened in the house. It asks a lot of questions about what types of improvements have you done? When did you do them? Why did you do them? It asks about your community. Do you have noise issues? Do you have neighbor issues? Neighbor issues are a huge one. We'll talk about that another time. But those two documents are what the owner knows about the property. Here's what a lot of sellers don't know. You are also responsible for the disclosures that you received when you purchased the property, whether that was 2 years ago or 20 years ago. You're responsible for all of that knowledge too. So it's really important for you to keep that information so that when you're going to sell your property, you can pass that knowledge along with it. So what happens? On a sell side, they forget. You've lived in this property because you don't remember every single thing that you've done. You're required to disclose all of that. And you're like, but how? And this is where things can get challenging. Most sellers, in my experience, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, don't disclose enough information. They'll check a box, yes, but they don't actually answer the question, or they don't provide enough information about why something was checked yes.
Right.
On the same side, if you're looking on the buy side and you're reviewing that, you don't actually know what you're looking at. You can see the box was checked yes, and it's like, okay, this happened, but there's no extra information. And now you're going into this transaction and saying, I understand what they told me, and I didn't do any further investigation, and now I'm having problems. And that's going to set a buyer up for trouble down the road, because if there is an actual issue with non-disclosure, if they didn't do proper due diligence, you might, as a buyer, be shut out from recovering any damages from a seller who actually didn't disclose properly. And this is one of the things that we really don't know the true scope of how bad non-disclosure is. Based on the phone calls that I get on a monthly basis, it's a lot. And the reason why we can't properly track how bad non-disclosures are is because we have mandatory mediation in California. Mediation is a private process where people, deal with their issues without going to court. So most of these issues are resolved in mediation, but we don't know how bad it is because we don't have a way to track it. So how do you deal with this? As a buyer, you ask more questions. If you're unsure about the answer that a seller is providing to you on a seller disclosure, you ask, can you provide more information? Absolutely. And this does something for you. It allows you to make a more informed decision, right? This is not the money pit, right? You're not going into this property knowing that you're going to be having to fix everything up. You can make a more informed decision about, is this a risk you're willing to take on? Yes, the garage floods at every time that it rains, but it's because they don't have a French drain around it, right? Or they don't have proper gutters. Things that can be fixed, things that you may be willing to take on.
Right.
Right? And on the sell side, the more that you disclose, the easier it is for you to defend yourself if a buyer comes back and says, hey, you didn't tell me about this. Right? Because the other thing is, and this goes for buyers and sellers, y'all don't review things enough, right?
They skim through it really fast and sign.
And you're going to sign on the buy side, you're going to sign a couple hundred pages worth of stuff during this process. It's really easy to just say, you know what? We just want to get to closing. There's so much going on. Check, 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 check. without actually reviewing the things. Take the time, spend the time, compare the answers, because there's some overlap in those two documents.
Ask us questions.
Ask us questions, right? And sometimes, asking the question, your agent may not be able to provide the answer because it crosses a line into, this is too legal for me to answer. That's okay. Ask the question anyway, because the people that you're working with, Melinda in particular, know the other people that you need to be talking to. Hi, that's me. But ask the question, because if you don't ask the question, you are never going to get the answer. And then in the future, it could really, really hurt your ability to fix things.
And, one of the things too I see is sellers, especially when they're filling out the disclosures, sometimes put opinions. And what I always advise them is put the facts in.
Stick to the facts, Jack.
Stick to the facts. So you don't need to color your information with your opinion, or, I always didn't like this layout, for example. That's just an opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really, hey, no, there was a hole here in this floor and we repaired it. That's a fact. We just want to talk about that.
Yeah.
And there can be some tricky disclosures. The trickiest disclosure I ever had was a murder in an alley behind a house that we were selling. That was a fun one. But we disclosed it, right? Because we needed to disclose it.
Right.
But we stuck with the facts. We didn't know what happened beyond that.
Yeah.
And, that's all we disclosed.
And
that's
death,
all we knew.
Death is actually kind of an interesting one as far as disclosures go. It's not super common, but failure to disclose a death in a property within a certain period of time has a big impact. If it's okay, I'll tell you a short story.
Sure.
So I was talking with a buyer, and it was the husband, and he called me and he said, listen, we just closed escrow, and we found out that someone died, and this was during COVID. Someone died in the house, in the primary bedroom. And he said, and my wife is refusing to move into the property. Mm-hmm. She's deeply religious. She was having very, very bad feelings about being in this property where somebody died and where they would be spending, half of their days asleep. He's like, what can we do? And I asked him a question. I said, well, was this disclosed? And he says, well, I don't know. And I was like, okay, go get this form, go look at this page and look for this box. And he said, no. And I said, okay, well, tell me, how did you find out about this? Well, there was a tenant that had remained. There was a tenant in the house, and he'd offered to help the tenant move out. It was an elderly person, and he offered to help this person move out. And this person was very friendly and just shared what had happened. Said that, that the other person that they were living with had passed, that it took several days for the coroner to remove the body because of COVID. And the way that he was telling me the story, you could see the color draining out of his face as they're realizing what's happening, and his wife is completely shutting down. And these are things that could unwind that sale, which is a really bad problem for the seller. But then there's also this problem with the buyers. Like, they bought this house, they were expecting to move into it, and because of their deeply held, beliefs, they're no longer able to move in.
Right.
So then what do you do? So this is the death one is kind of a goofy one, but it just goes to show, the things that happen in your home are going to have a big impact on what you do in the future.
Absolutely. And so keep records, keep notes, and when you can't remember everything, well, like you said, also keep those old disclosures from before. I think that's a really critical thing to be aware of too. Keep that folder. I know we give all of our clients a folder with all the paperwork. Keep that folder, so we'll need that again later. If you have any questions, you can reach us. Where would they reach you?
You can reach me on my website, www.yourhomelegal.com.
And you can reach me at 562-316-2915 or melinda@theelmerteam.com. Thanks so much for watching, and please feel free to forward this to your friends and subscribe below.